Hey everybody, hope you guys are doing well. Welcome to Reread the Documents Deux Talking episode 41. I have with me a good friend of the show, Greg McCarron, one half of the Antedote podcast and channel on YouTube with his partner, Jeremy Roth Gushel. Greg, how are you doing this evening?
I'm doing pretty good this evening. Thanks for having me back on once again.
Anytime, man. I've been a fan of the Antidote for a very long period of time. I've been listening to you guys for I want to say about 2 years now, maybe a little bit less than 2 years. And I've been a fan of both yours and Jeremy's work that you guys have done exposing the truth when it comes to the machinations of the world order, and talking about Trump and not being afraid to really dig into what people have said or the documents or any of that, or even as much as something that you guys do that I wish that I could, which is the interviews that you guys have done, or the more of the call-ins that y'all have done to programs, or really doing on the street interviews and activism, which I wish I hopefully will be able to do more of in the future, and I greatly appreciate both of y'all doing that.
Appreciate that too. And it's something that it's definitely not something that comes natural to me, and I don't think it comes natural to Jeremy either. It's just something that more and more feel like that is a necessary function to be done, and it's something we're realizing more and more that this method of not just going and putting video cameras like we've done in Iowa recently or other times in the past that Jeremy's been doing for well over a decade now, but also even just calling into radio shows, calling into C-SPAN, Washington Journal, when certain guests are on. I mean, those can be very effective in getting information out. So trying to utilize it more and more, and you get better at it the more and more you do it. You get more comfortable the more you do it. And I'm not to a point where I'd say I'm comfortable doing it yet, but I'm better than I was like the first time I ever made a phone call. So.
Yeah, I get very nervous when I do it. I'm an introvert in that regard. I actually don't really mind doing this at all. This doesn't stress me out in the slightest bit, but me having to call into someone, I would have butterflies in my stomach. I feel like I want to puke. Especially when you're trying to confront somebody, you know what I mean? And it's difficult. But, I want to try to do it more. I'm going to hopefully if... the kill stream has Harrison back on from InfoWars. I'm going to try to call in and ask him about the Council for National Policy. Someone called in last week and asked him about Scientology and Alex Jones's connections to Scientology, and that was an excellent clip. I was laughing because of course Harrison was like, well, pretty much Alex Jones is beholden to no one. And of course, you and I both know that Alex Jones is a lackey of the Council for National Policy, at the bare minimum. Now, I do believe that there are numerous connections between Alex Jones and his love for Scientology. I mean, Prison Planet, after all. I mean, come on, people. But Josh Reeves has done a lot of work from that, from his movie The Spellcasters.
Sure.
So I mean, yeah, I do appreciate you guys calling in. You calling in to Lee Stranahan.
Yes.
And yes, I do have questions for Lee. For example, his love for Russia, whether or not he knows about the Council for National Policy.
Oh, he has to. He was like, I mean, what I've realized about Lee, and Lee is a very, very interesting person, and I'll say the reason why Jeremy and me even more so than Jeremy, but Jeremy also, have zeroed in so intently on Lee Stranahan in the last few months. We started to really focus on him as being a very interesting person in his role at Radio Sputnik, which is a Russian state-owned and operated media outlet. But since the start of this year, Radio Sputnik now is airing 6 hours of content on 3 local Kansas City radio stations. A Kansas City station that owns that is broadcasted on 3 different stations here in the Kansas City area. A station called KCXL, which is headed by a man who runs a lot of Christian, conservative-oriented programming. There's at least an hour of the Alex Jones Show that runs on this station. True News with Rick Wiles runs on this station, and also the station is airing 6 hours a day of Sputnik programming, which means 3 hours in the morning rush hour, then I want to say 3 hours in the afternoon rush hour. And the 3 hours in the morning is Fault Lines with Lee Stranahan and Garland Nixon. And I believe there's another program later in the day with, I believe it's a program called, damn it, what's the name of the show? it's John Kiriakou, the CIA whistleblower, and Brian Becker of the leftist Answer Coalition. And I believe their program, Loud and Clear, is also broadcasted on the local KCXL affiliate. So we've really zeroed in on Lee Stranahan now that Sputnik, which we do see as very much running, propaganda on behalf of Russia in the United States, although you have to be careful and how you address that, because you don't want to sound like the New York Times in recent stories it's ran about Sputnik, or the Kansas City NPR affiliate, which is really doing smear jobs on just the generic boogeyman Russian propaganda, Cold War, taking us back into that time period of the cartoonish Russians just looking to destroy America. So you don't want to get caught up in that, but you also want to do it in a way that takes some of the legitimate criticisms of a Russian state propaganda running in the United States, but also do it in a manner that goes outside of this very over-the-top criticism that just, I think by design, seems to discredit the criticism of and actually allows these operations to go on without any real pushback. And so Sputnik, this is the first place in the United States other than Washington, D.C. that Radio Sputnik is airing on locally, is Kansas City, Missouri. So this definitely seems like this was done there's something divine about this, because it's just so ironic that they set up shop in Kansas City right as we started to zero in on Lee Stranahan, the ex protege of Andrew Breitbart, who's now a fixture on Sputnik. And you mentioned Stranahan, the Council for International Policy. I don't see how he can't understand a lot of this, a lot more than he certainly lets on, because I've looked. You can go on the Breitbart SoundCloud page. There's over 100 interviews with Lee Stranahan from late 2015 to beginning of 2017, right in that 2016 election period where Stranahan was a key investigative reporter for Breitbart. And among the two things that he seemed to be pushing were things that his protege or his mentor, Andrew Breitbart, was very much all about, which was the pushing of the left is the enemy, and also the weaponized narrative of Islam is the enemy. So it's very interesting. I think Stranahan knows a lot more than he lets on. And sometimes I've been going back and listening to interviews. Sometimes he'll let certain things slip out. Like he let slip out an interview he did with Jason Goodman from about 2.5, close to 3 years ago, that Andrew Breitbart was, he's a key player at the Drudge Report. And remember, it was Matt Drudge who broke the Monica Lewinsky story after Newsweek would not. And it appears increasingly that was done on behalf of, this was an Israeli operation as far as getting dirt on Bill Clinton, to steer Bill Clinton in certain directions with policies related to Iraq, and also with policies related to the Israel-Palestine issue. And Andrew Breitbart was, according to Lee Stranahan, he let it right out that it was Breitbart who was basically had just as much influence as Drudge did, and was very influential in what got onto the front page of Drudge Report. And this story is what really made Drudge Report a major news source. This was the first major story the Drudge Report broke back in 1998, was the Monica Lewinsky story. And as Bill Cooper astutely pointed out, the day Hillary Clinton said this, possibly the one true thing Hillary Clinton's ever said in her life, there's a vast right-wing conspiracy.
Yeah, I've said that, which was the CNP, by the way.
yes, and it's the CNP, and it's the Richard Mellon Scaife media empire, which goes obviously right hand in glove with the Council for National Policy. And of course, William Cooper, the day that Hillary Clinton said that, was right on the ball with that. If you go back and listen to his radio archives.
Yeah, I've definitely mentioned that beforehand, of the Council for National Policy with the Tyson Corner meeting, of them setting up the really weak trying to impeach Bill Clinton over perjury. I guess he was impeached, but he was, not convicted in the Senate. And going after him off of Monica Lewinsky and Linda Tripp, but not going after him on Whitewater, Amina, Arkansas, or anything that would also the CNP would also be involved in with too as well.
And Linda Tripp appears to have some interesting connections. I'm not too entirely up to date on her, but I know there's a Delta Force connection, and there's also an Israeli connection. So.
Yeah, and I got to give a shout out to S90 in the chat. If you want to drop your video that you shared with me of Harrison talking about Scientology, drop it in the chat, brother. It was you who shared that video with me. And I do want to make that known. And
Yeah, I'd
also,
like to see that too.
and also Lee Veltman also mentioned that Stranahan, Goodman, and George Webb all have connections together. That is true. I remember I used to watch videos of George Webb meeting with Lee Stranahan and Jason Goodman at Lee Stranahan's journalism school.
Yeah, I need to. Yeah, I've noticed that there are some clips, some videos of Stranahan and George Webb and Goodman all together. Something very interesting is that Lee Stranahan in the past has repeatedly expressed his dislike for Jerome Corsi based on the fact that he says Corsi was pushing conspiracy theories about the death of Andrew Breitbart, who he called his best friend. And he had publicly stated on Twitter and through other platforms that he will not associate with Jerome Corsi. Then Jason Goodman arranges to have them together on his A Very
Corsi Christmas
special, where they're just chumming it up and they're acting like they're great friends. So Goodman and Stranahan revealed during this 2017 interview I'm referring to that they've known each other for probably over 25 years. So.
Yeah, it seems about right. I mean, I sent you the Very Corsi Christmas. We watched and laughed, and it was funny, and how much misinformation was there, and also made me sick to my stomach, and parts made me mad. I will say I will give Lee Stranahan credit when credit is due, in that he at least did do some good research in the sex trafficking that was occurring in the, I believe, North Dakota Indian reservations. So I do have to give him a little credit when credit's due. It does seem like that reporting was solid from what I have seen, and what I tried to research it myself, it does seem like he brought that to light. Now, why he did that, I have no idea. But it does seem that reporting is correct when I did research it. It's been a year now when I went back to try to corroborate that, but it did seem like he was telling the truth there. There is a lot of trafficking that does occur in Native American reservations throughout the United States, sex trafficking and abuse, and a lot of crimes associated with that. So I have to give Stranahan credit for that.
And when somebody's in the type of investigative journalism that Stranahan is into, you will get a lot of truth out of it. I mean, I think that's definitely, I don't think that, certainly not just everything, and there's a lot of people out there who are much worse than Lee Stranahan, but I mean, there will be truth found in that kind of work, for sure, no question. And I'll also say another thing that Stranahan, at least on the surface, that did was very good, was he was right at the forefront of calling out Mike Cernovich and Alan
Yes,
Dershowitz.
he was.
The whole thing with Virginia Roberts and the role they were playing, and Cernovich pretending like he was this principled person who was trying to help her, when in reality, he's actually working with Dershowitz to try and silence her. But on the flip side of that, to this day, Stranahan continues to push the line that, well, Trump kicked him out of Mar-a-Lago and cooperated.
Yeah, there's the fix. The fix is in, is it not,
similar,
Greg?
in a different way, it's similar to, Ryan Dawson runs the same spin from his own narrative as well. So
yeah, why would Ryan Dawson do such a thing if he's our guy? Why would he not admit?
Ryan Dawson was, I just found a video I just saw back when David Duke endorsed Trump and all this media spectacle over it. He was calling it out and talking about how Duke is ex-Ku Klux Klan, and look at how bad the optics of this are. Now, well, he and David Duke are like best friends now. So
Imagine that, operatives and operatives and operatives.
Anyhow, going back to InfoWars, it just made me think about a man who's very much in the news right now, of course, being Roger Stone. And I want to say this about Roger Stone. I say, you know what? Let's pardon him for whatever happened in 2016. Whatever did or didn't happen in 2016, let's pardon him. And then let's immediately indict him for his leading role in helping to get the Iraq war criminal, 9/11 criminal George W. Bush elected. And then we can go ahead and also throw in charges for his role in the honeypot sexual honeypot that resulted in the takedown of Elliot Spitzer as New York governor, regardless of what you think of Elliot Spitzer. And I'm sure, it's not our guy, so to speak. But at the same time, these were illegal activities that Roger Stone was involved in. And then we could get into whatever his history is with things like long-term Roy Cohn-style operations and all that. So I say, let's pardon him, and then let's indict him on this other stuff. That would be my dream scenario.
Yeah, and
although he probably deserves to be pardoned, he probably does deserve to be indicted for certain things that may have gone on in 2016. But I'm just trying to come to a deal that everybody can accept anyway.
It was the Met scandal in South Dakota, which Lee Stranahan investigated. I will say it does have a lot of correlations between, like Infowars being against Child Protective Services. Not to say that Child Protective Services does not do shady stuff from time to time, but I have known some people who worked for CPS who were honest, who really did try to help the children that were involved. A good personal friend of mine was a agent for the Child Protective Services in Indiana. But I posted it in the chat. I do want to give him credit for that. When I looked it up, it does seem to be what he was trying to report seemed to be accurate.
Yes.
Yeah, I can't disagree with Lee on that. I will say that his ever ending love for Russia, almost to the point where I think Lee Stranahan may love Russia more than the United States. That's an issue to me.
Well, it's interesting that he left Breitbart for whatever reason. He says it was because Breitbart wasn't giving him freedom to do certain things he wanted to do, and then he pops up on Sputnik, and now he claims that he's got all the freedom at Sputnik that he hasn't gotten, that he didn't have at Breitbart. And it's interesting that John Kiriakou, who I mentioned earlier, hosts another show on Sputnik, Loud and Clear. There's a New Republic profile on John Kiriakou that details his time at Sputnik and how he got there and his philosophy and all that. And flat out in like the first or second paragraph of this article, I can actually I can send this to you if you want to. I don't know if I've ever sent you this article before, but I can even send it to you right now, and we can even put it in the if you want to even add it to our stream.
Okay.
That Stranahan was told specifically by the head of Radio Sputnik, a man by the name of Mendia Gavashelli, to, quote, steer clear of 9/11 truthers. And I've asked Lee Stranahan and Garland Nixon, and Jeremy actually called in the other day about that, and they say that they haven't received similar instructions themselves. I don't know if that's true or not. I won't assert that they have without proof of that. But I mean, Kiriakou was given these instructions to steer clear of 9/11 truthers. That's a quote directly from Kiriakou, as quoted in this New Republic profile on him. And if that was a lie, then Kiriakou could have, said that this isn't true. But I don't think he ever tried to push back against that.
I will say that Lee Stranahan is probably a little bit more higher up on the totem pole than Garland Nixon is.
Yes, I've always, no disrespect to Garland
No,
Nixon.
no, I'm not disrespecting him at all.
I understand that. But I've always gotten a little bit of a, almost, I want to be delicate now. I say it's almost a little bit of an out-to-lunch type of mentality from Garland Nixon, that he doesn't seem to be in the loop or very understanding of a lot of these issues. And I think Lee Stranahan is very understanding of the information he's pushing on Sputnik. And Jeremy's compared Lee Stranahan as playing the role of Sean Hannity to Garland's Alan Colmes, once again, I want to be delicate in how I.
No, I would argue that Alan Colmes probably was a better human being than Sean Hannity was.
No, I'm not even getting into that and that whole thing. But yeah, I would probably say the same thing is true. But in terms of Garland kind of being, Colmes kind of being a pushover to Hannity, and Hannity controlling and dictating what was done on their Fox News program and all that, and Colmes kind of playing the role of like the liberal kind of push over to him, because Garland does defer to Lee a lot, and when Lee's not there, interestingly, Garland actually has much more
to say.
Jeremy says much more to say as far as actual liberal critiques of Trump and all that, and that aren't really expressed when Lee's there controlling the show. So that was my comparison.
I will say with Garland in that it's probably a difference between he and Lee Stranahan is that Lee Stranahan, if you asked him what the Council for National Policy was, he'd know exactly what it is, but he'd go, I don't know what that is. And you ask Garland, and Garland would probably either, if he did know what it is, say, yeah, I know what it is, or he would genuinely not say he does not know what it is. And so usually that makes a difference within someone who's high up in the CNP, or someone who has high knowledge of the CNP, and someone who does not. Because someone who has high knowledge of the CNP or are very high up in the CNP, they will deny to the hilt that they are part of it.
Well, I mean, I called in and asked in the aftermath of the Soleimani assassination, because I was really thinking about this, that, we need to be honest about the nature of who and what got Donald Trump elected, and how, it needs to be at the forefront of what we're going to be talking about, especially if we present ourselves as being critics of Trump. Like, Stranahan will present himself as being a critic of Trump's foreign policy. And I asked him about the Council for National Policy and Cambridge Analytica and Breitbart, and I also brought up Eric Prince and things like Psy Group, and I basically said these people, they are responsible for cultivating Trump's message into a message that could win a general election in terms of being a general election viable message for the 2016 election with all of the means that they had at their disposal. And I said that, these people basically are the reason Trump got there, and that they're running the show, Trump. And then Stranahan, his response was to say, well, I would agree with you if you had said that they were, but they're actually, it's not that they control Trump or whatever, it's that they're using Trump. So
yes, of course. Yes, they're using him to get their vast right-wing agenda put through. Okay. I mean, what about
didn't even put it like that, though. But I mean, Stranahan definitely has an understanding of a lot more than I think I don't know, that he may or may not let on about. Not even about the council, and also the inner workings of things like Cambridge Analytica and the Breitbart operation, as far as it related to Trump and how they were the keys to Trump.
Well, I mean, Breitbart spoke to the CMP in the late 2000s. I mean, Lee would have had to have been with him. I mean,
I don't know if he was with them, because he says the way Lee tells the story is that he basically befriended Breitbart about 2 years before his death in early 2010, when Andrew Breitbart was being blacklisted from conservative media because of his coverage of a Department of Agriculture scandal with Shirley Sherrod.
That seems a little bit of rewriting history, if you tell me.
It could be, because I mean, Stranahan also just coincidentally happened to work at a Huffington Post before he knew Stranahan. And Stranahan before he says he knew Breitbart, and Breitbart was right there with Arianna Huffington when the Huffington Post was started, before she became a Democrat. So,
yeah, I mean, so why don't we talk about good old Paula White for a little bit?
Sure, yeah, and that'll be a good segue into something else with Lee Stranahan that I sent you this morning. It'll be related to Paula White, I think. In some way. So let's go ahead.
So my uncle, he knew about Paula White before I even did. It was around the 2016 election, and he was talking to me. He was like, well, she's going to be the one who's Trump's spiritual advisor. He was like, John, that's a red flag. And I was like, at the time, I was like, I don't care. What's dominionism? Trump's our guy, and stuff like that. And so, I hate Hillary Clinton, which I still do hate Hillary Clinton, but I just like Trump too. So let's be real here. But now, as I was, completely oblivious. So, of course, the more of the stuff that comes out of Paula White's mouth, I can't say that I'm shocked. I can't be like, this the stuff that I hear her say is just insane.
The brazenness of the things they say.
Oh yeah, prosperity gospel. God wants you to live your best life now. And yeah, I mean, tell that to the Chinese Christians that are being persecuted in China, or the Palestinian Christians who are being persecuted in Israel.
Christians around the world who have been persecuted throughout history.
Yeah, I mean, I'm sure that they were living their best life now. But still, nonetheless, I found the story that was posted to me by S90 in my Discord group, that Paula White was telling her followers to skip paying their electric bills so they could send her money and God would richly bless them. Now, I think that is for shameful gain, which makes her a false teacher, at least according to Paul in the New Testament. So, I don't think that's a good thing. I think you do need to pay your bills. I think God would want you to pay your bills, because Paula White can easily get by without having your electric money.
Don't you get the impression that they might just be at least very, very slightly taking advantage of the biblical commands about giving your 10% to the church? Just slightly. Just slightly.
Yeah, I mean, okay, so this was her quote, because I don't want to misquote her. Instead of writing that check to the house of God as I'm instructed to, then what I'm saying spiritually is, Florida Power and Light, I have now established a spiritual law that puts you first. So Florida Power and Light saved my family. Florida Power and Light deliver my drug-addicted son. Florida Power and Light kill this cancer that doctors say is in my body. Well, I mean, I'm pretty sure God also would not want your money to go to Paula White. It's just me. I can't 100% know what God, and I'm not trying to say I'm speaking for him, but I would say it's highly likely that God wants you to pay your bills so that you can provide your family instead of giving your money to this charlatan and false teacher
Yeah,
who's the
that's
embodiment of the spirit of Python. And if you have any money, a little bit left over from paying your bills, I wouldn't necessarily give it to her. Instead, maybe I would give it to local charities that you have vetted to might help your fellow man. Or if you can't give money, donate some of your free time to charitable outfits. That's what a good Christian would do instead of giving their money to Paula White.
Yeah, and I mean, you see a trend with people like Paula White and some of these other quote unquote spiritual. What is the team called? Is it Trump's Spiritual Advisory Board? Is that what it is?
Yeah.
That Paula White's the head of.
Yeah.
And there's all these televangelist prosperity gospel combination of prosperity gospel.
The New Apostolic Movement.
And Dominionism, New Apostolic Movement. Yes, and these are the people that are around Trump. These are the people who have promised Christians that Trump is one of us now. He's a different man, and and it's like it becomes clearly obvious. You take 10 seconds, you take a minute and look at these people, and you can see that no, Trump has not changed, and he's just like these people. And these people are saying Trump has changed. Are not actually representing the faith themselves. So it's absurd. Oh, did you ever see the clip of Kenneth Copeland and Jesse Duplantis where they're discussing why they need to have their own jets? Because basically they can't talk to God in commercial.
Oh, well, that sucks. Because
I'd have to send you that, but that's
according to the Bible and according to my Lord and Savior Jesus Christ, he mentioned that, if anybody, I could pray to him pretty much anywhere, and the Father will hear, as long as I do it with earnest. And do it with faith. So, I wonder who. I guess maybe they're not praying to God or Jesus. It's not wrong. I mean, maybe Kenneth Copeland. Maybe he's not praying to God or Jesus. I don't know. Maybe he's praying to Satan. Sorry about that. Maybe Satan can only hear you in first class or your own private jet.
yeah.
But
Wouldn't you think they would want to maybe use their time on a commercial plane to heal people? I mean.
Or at least, take that money and actually give it to people to help them out. Because Lord knows there are many Americans that could use their help that are barely struggling instead of them flying on their private jet. But that's what I guess Christianity really is, because God wants you to live your best life now. And the best life now means to fly around in a private jet and have a mansion, I guess. But it's extremely sickening to me. That these people act like they are Christians and they are farthest from that.
And I just sent you a clip of a man saying that Trump received Kenneth Copeland's prayers stronger than anybody ever has. So there's a real ringing endorsement for you. And I mean, Kenneth Copeland is such an obvious charlatan, and even my dad, who I think is pretty gullible when it comes to a lot of these televangelists and prosperity gospel people, he told me that he sensed an evil vibe the first time he ever saw Kenneth Copeland. So.
Yeah, he does look a little weird. Do you remember who Trump's? God, I can't believe I'm calling a blank on this. Who was Trump's mentor that he used to go?
Norman Vincent Peale.
Yes, the great Norman Vincent Peale. Sorry, I blanked on his name. And he also preached an early version of the prosperity gospel and the whole what they call positive thinking within Christianity. So I'm pretty sure when Trump said to Council for National Policy member Frank Luntz back in 2017 that he does not pray to God and ask for forgiveness, which some of the CNPers did say that made them feel weary about Trump, funny enough. But I guess majority of the people swallowed it and voted, I have family members who are evangelicals who voted for Trump. Even if I tell them that, I guess they say that it doesn't matter to them. That's one of the main tenets of Christianity is to ask for forgiveness. So I mean, it's just they're using it. They're using all of this dominionism to set up a theocratic government, which is what the Council for National Policy wants with their Judeo-Christian values. And on top of that, they're also using it as a mask for Zionism.
Yes, it is an very unholy alliance between this Christian dominionism and obviously in Zionism, where it seems to me that the whole perception we have in the alternative media, so much of alternative media, is that it's the kind of the Jews are in control of the whole situation, and that's the answer. But clearly, I think you see a dynamic where both like the Christian dominionists, Zionists, and the the Jewish side is they're kind of using each other, I think, to a large extent for their own goals. But at the end of the day, they come together in this bigger cause, it seems like. But I think there's a lot of using of both. I think both entities use the other a lot for their own purposes.
Yeah, I mean, definitely. I mean, that's where you're getting the Lance Wallanu, who's a very strong Dominionist, and I did a video of him on this channel of him pushing
was it your Trump Cyrus video?
Trump Cyrus prophecy that Trump is the Cyrus
By
of
way,
the Great.
One more thing I'll say about Lee Stranahan is I sent you a couple of clips this morning of
to circle back to that. Yes,
speaking at Lance Wallnu's what is it? Seven Mountains conferences in 2017 and 2019. He describes Stranahan describes Wallnu as a friend and a brother and a strong man in Christ who he looks up to. So.
Yeah, no.
Wallnu, though, if you look at videos of Wallnu, it's like, how can anybody take this man seriously? If you look at the videos of his quote prophecies, and in addition to that, in addition to being an obvious phony, in my opinion, there's a very creepy vibe about Wallnu.
Yeah, I mean, he takes prosperity gospel to the hilt, and he does practice a little bit of deliverance ministry, which I am a fan of, like Leviathan and everything like that. But instead of sticking with that, like a good deliverance minister did, who helped many people, like Win Worley, who did not make hardly any money, and operated a church in the outskirts of Chicago, in some of the roughest neighborhoods in Chicago. Having him, who he was a great man of faith and a great man of God, and then have his brand of deliverance ministry be taken over by a majority of these people within the New Apostolic movement is a way, in my belief, I'll say it, of Satan subverting his work. And it's really sickening that they're using it. I mean, with the whole Seven Mountains mandate, did you get a chance to look into what is Seven Mountains Dominionism?
I didn't get a chance to read through the whole thing.
So the Seven Mountains of Dominionism is for the Council for National Policy, pretty much, to control education, religion, family, business, government, military, arts, entertainment, and media. Why business? Why business? Like, why would God mandate a form of dominionism that we control business? That sounds very corptocratic to me. Feeding the corptocracy beast. I don't understand. Family, I understand. Family,
well,
sure.
That makes the well, that would make whatever that would make whatever Koch brothers' interests, for example, are involved in all this very happy. Possibly.
Now, Greg, that would never happen. Now, come on now.
I was gonna throw in one quick point about Wallnu, and you talked about like this kind of what you see as the spirit of Satan within like the takeover of what you were talking about with this deliverance movement. Is I think that can be manifested when you see Lance Wallnu with this combination of prosperity gospel dominionism and his narrative. He's constantly pushing that Donald Trump's fighting like Donald Trump is a bulwark against this satanic deep state.
Yeah, okay. Sure. No.
Trump is God's imperfect instrument.
His chaos.
God's chaos president, doesn't he? Is that a title?
Oh, yes. Okay, yes, God's chaos candidate, which of course moves into chaos magic and Alexander Dugin and Duginism, and it's just, it's so sickening.
Well, it's very interesting that I didn't realize this at the time, but I've realized this more recently when I was looking into what you had sent me about Jim Baker. Not Jim Baker. Excuse me, Rick Joyner and the New Apostolic movement and the connections to this Russian oligarch who seems to be pretty close to Putin, who's the head of this world this world policy forum, and you did an entire stream on this article from this Center Against Religious Extremism article on this with Rick Joyner and calling for martial law and the Russian connection to this, and right from, and I didn't realize this at the time, but right from the moment Trump was elected, and I wish, this is a matter of like wishing I'd known then what knowing now, wishing I had known it then.
Well, we both have that. We both have that.
Yes, we do. I think everybody has that to an extent, but immediately after the election, Jim Baker immediately was pushing the idea of was pushing the stories that were coming out of places like Breaking Israel News, and I think even WorldNet Daily, that the Sanhedrin had asked Trump and Putin to rebuild the temple. So right away they were pushing through this, like, Trump and Putin are partners in this prophecy style of now that's very interesting to me. I didn't realize that was being pushed in the immediate aftermath of the Trump victory.
Yeah, very much so. Now, I'm researching something currently that I'm going to do a show on very soon, but I want to ask you, have you ever heard of the, oh man, now I got to find it, the Russian oligarch, hold on, let me get his name. He runs Tsargrad Television, which is like the CMP, like a CNP Fox News type channel over in Russia. His name is Konstantin Malafeev.
I've heard the name. I'm not very familiar with him.
Okay.
And I'm not at all familiar with this former Fox News producer who he hired by the name of Jack Hannock.
Jack Hannock. Yeah, so I've been doing some research onto that when it was brought to my attention by one of my followers on YouTube, Sviv Jansen, I think is his name. If I'm mispronouncing your name, I apologize. But he brought it to my attention. I started doing research and started noticing that Alexander Dugin works for this television station, and that they would have Alex Jones on. Now, get this, all right? Now, this is crazy, Greg. When I was watching on Russian television, okay, Alex Jones and Dugin speaking to one another, all right? When Dugin was speaking Russian to Alex Jones, I did not see an earpiece. I didn't see a translator. I could be wrong, okay? And I'm not going to say what I had with 100% confidence, but I will say this. It did appear to me, just like Alex Jones has a Russian passport, okay, that Alex Jones knows Russian.
Very, very interesting. Yeah, it's the first I've heard of this Tsargrad TV.
Do you think I'm onto something here?
You could be. I mean, you could be. It could be, and I think that. Well, I mean, Alex Jones did have the Russian producer for InfoWars. What was her name?
Now you're teaching me something that I didn't know.
Oh, there was I believe she might still be employed by InfoWars. Her name is, and I think Adam Green and Matthew North did a video where they talked in depth about this. Daria is her name, a Russian employee of InfoWars, and Alex Jones even made a video with her joking that he's controlled by Russia and that the Russians are running InfoWars and telling him what to do. So
yeah,
I mean, there's something there, and I would also point to somebody else who could be a key part of understanding. Could possibly be a key part of understanding whatever could be going on with Alex Jones in Russia is Dr. Steve Pieczenik.
Oh yeah, I have friends. Even my uncle, when he's still watching, he watches Alex Jones, so I don't have to. Okay, even though he knows Alex Jones is a CMP shill, he does it, so I don't have to. Okay, so interesting enough, there with Pieczenik. I know Pieczenik's an operative. Like, I'm safe to say that. I will go on the record and say that Pieczenik, in my opinion, is an operative. Now, I don't know for whom, but he's an operative. All right, and I will say, after watching and listening to a lot of stuff that Pieczenik puts out, he is an apologist for Russia, in my opinion.
Absolutely.
He is apologist. At least that he thinks that Trump is, he's apologist for Trump too, I guess is what I'm trying to say. And that he does frame everything through a Zionist lens to some degree, more than, Alex Jones, because Alex Jones is never going to, talk about Israel unless when he has to mention something about Israel.
I'm so intrigued. Okay, go ahead.
No, I was going to say about Pieczenik, he definitely, man, he is definitely a major disinformation agent, in my opinion.
Okay, go ahead.
No, I was going to say, what were you going to say about Pieczenik? Because I'm very interested.
I am so intrigued by Pieczenik, and I still can't say that I quite have there's a lot of people, I still don't have a real grip on exactly what Pieczenik is representing. I mean, he's a hard nut to crack, because there's a number of things that I find very intriguing about Pieczenik. One of the things that makes me think that he is very influential, more influential than anybody could possibly realize, is that with all the Sandy Hook stuff, that Steve Pieczenik is the only person in InfoWars who I've heard flat out say that Sandy Hook was a hoax and nobody died. Yet in all the
But
depositions of
Chinnick,
Alex,
yeah, that's interesting. Yeah, you're right. They never bring it up, do they?
yes, in all of the depositions of Alex Jones and Paul Joseph Watson and Rob Dew, they're mentioning all these people who may or may not have had anything to do with promoting, with who worked for InfoWars, especially in the Rob Dew deposition, as Rob Dew's the person who would have all that information about which employees did or didn't do what in his role with InfoWars and free speech systems, but never did who may or may not have been involved in producing or getting research for videos and material that InfoWars had done on Sandy Hook. But not once is this guy who, Steve Pieczenik, who said, hey, this is a I can't do my Steve Pieczenik impression, but this was a hoax and nobody died. Alex, what you're not understanding, Alex, is that nobody died at Sandy Hook.
I will tell you that you always
it's
need
not
to.
a very good Pieczenik, but whatever.
Now, I will say that as far as Sandy Hook is concerned, there are some abnormalities there. Okay, I will admit that, especially with Adam Lanza. But I will say though that it's interesting that they don't mention Steve Pieczenik. Okay, like why out of all the people, they're going to mention Wolfgang Halbig, they're going to mention James Fetzer. They're gonna, talk about Alex Jones making statements. Paul Joseph Watson throws Alex Jones under the bus, which was hilarious in my opinion.
They're even gonna talk about the big mouth, bald-headed guy from New England, Dan Badandi, but they won't mention.
Why won't they mention Steve Pieczenik? Is it because Steve Pieczenik is operative?
It's a great question. I mean, it's just so. And in general, Pieczenik goes very much ignored in any type of conversations about InfoWars within the media. It's very interesting, and Pieczenik is clearly a player. I mean, going back to Kissinger and also to James Baker, and and Pieczenik. I mean, there's a number of things that are so interesting about him, and it's unfortunate. It almost makes me want to listen to the Alex Jones show just so I can call in when Pieczenik's on with him sometime, because he had been taking phone calls.
Oh, really? That would be interesting.
Steve Pieczenik interviews that I've had a chance to catch, and I'd love to ask him. It's interesting you mentioned Pieczenik and Israel. That Pieczenik basically flat out blames Israel for September 11th, and he's like certainly the only employee of the InfoWars airwaves who, one of the only people who can flat out say that and get zero pushback from Alex Jones whatsoever. I mean, Pieczenik just says all this stuff, and Alex never pushes back against him.
Do you want my theory for why that is?
Go for it.
It's the same reason why Jeff Rentz would never push back against Gordon Duff until Jeff Rentz had an automobile accident, supposedly, and almost died, okay? I believe, and I'm going to go on record saying this, I believe that in some capacity that Gordon Duff was some sort of handler to Jeff Rentz in the same vein that Steve Pieczenik was some sort of handler to Alex Jones.
Interesting. I don't know much about that. That's definitely interesting. I mean, I could definitely see Pieczenik as a handler for Jones. I mean, he started appearing on InfoWars, I think, in the not too distant aftermath of September 11th, and he never showed his face, I don't think, until just before the election when he made the counter coup video, just before the 2016 election. I could definitely see that, but it's interesting that these are questions I don't think have been asked anywhere, that Pieczenik is all about blaming Israel for September 11th publicly on air at a time when InfoWars has hired both Roger Stone and Jerome Corsi to be top, pro-Trump propagandists at the InfoWars operation. And, if you ask, and Corsi is just all over anybody who criticizes Israel as an anti-Semite line, and, Roger Stone's not going to get into any of that stuff. So it's very interesting that Pieczenik was able to say and do all of that at a time when Stone and Corsi were on air. And he's also very critical of Benjamin Netanyahu, but it's always in this strain of, it is in this very Russian, centric strain. Basically, the world would be better if the U.S. just left the Middle East and let the Russians take over. And one thing that's really interesting about Pieczenik is that Pieczenik's the only person I've heard say that he is the only person I've heard who's asserted that Vladimir Putin at some level signed off on the Soleimani assassination. And that's very interesting because then, I found articles detailing the, Russia and Iran being at odds in Syria, which to me points to the idea of Russia managing Iran's presence in Syria, and that Soleimani was seen to an extent as being a thorn in the side of Russia's goals in Syria. So it's interesting to me that Steve Pieczenik is the only person I've heard say that, certainly within alternative media, that Putin may have signed off at some level on the Soleimani killing, because everybody portrays this as just, it was Trump and Trump doing Israel's bidding, doing Netanyahu's bidding. But Steve Pieczenik, who is very critical of Netanyahu, whatever that's worth, has said that he thinks Putin signed off on this.
And let me clarify: it was a Russian visa, not a Russian passport, but still, nonetheless, like you think you and I would be able to get a Russian visa that Trump's, that Alex Jones is putting out there, So I mean,
it's just like. Yeah, it's just like, didn't Jones allegedly have InfoWars employees were found with Time Warner badges? Now
I will say this is pure speculation on my part, but I do believe that with Alex Jones having all of that battle-ready gear that he's going into protests now with the APCs and everything like that, I've heard Josh Reeves and other people mention that Blackwater was giving security to Alex Jones. Now, I wouldn't doubt that.
Wasn't Zach? Who's his? There's a Quentin, a particular security member of Alex Jones' security team, who was Blackwater. I believe his name is Quentin.
Now S90's got a question in the chat. If the secret right is run by Jewish interests, though, why all the blatant anti-Semitism of the right? Unless the current state of Israel is not aligned with the secret right. I guess he's talking about the CMP. As I've mentioned before, S90, and as Greg and I have discussed, the Council for National Policy makes strange bedfellows with both Zionists and anti-Zionists. So you'll have the white nationalists like the LBRY family running the National Policy Institute, sitting very near with the next table over David Horowitz. So I mean, strange bedfellows get things done, I guess.
And more and more I'm realizing this from this perspective, from a number of perspectives. It's very obvious when you look at things now why the Council for National Policy was never focused on the same way that like the CFR and the Bilderbergs and the Trilateral Commission and other such think tanks have been focused on. And it's because, Council for National Policy is in so many ways is the glue that ties this bigger right-wing movement together. And when you talk about the strange bedfellows, there was reporting came out from, I believe it was Max Blumenthal. Obviously, Jeremy and I have talked very extensively about Max Blumenthal. You've also talked about him and his relationship with his father and the kind of role they seem to play as operatives. But I believe Max Blumenthal had reported years ago in The Nation that David Duke was paid $80,000 by Tony Perkins for his for lists of his supporters. I believe that's what he was paid. And so,
yes.
And this is, this strange bedfellows thing, that's an example of this. And, nobody, you've talked about people who I think have had some connections to aspects of the alt-right and also into this, some of these more orthodox Christian angles that will not talk about the Council for National Policy. And it just seems to me
or they won't talk about Zionism like Jay Dyer. No, yeah.
Or either they don't talk about Zionism or else they just weaponize the hell out of it and just make it into a platform for hating Jews, which is exactly what groups like the Anti-Defamation League want, is a bunch of raving lunatics running around talking about how much they hate Jews. But anyway.
Well, here you go. Here's something I got for you. Okay, so this is something I've talked about before. I talked about it, this will be on my later new CMP streams later on, but I have it posted up there of a company called Response Unlimited that Ann Nelson for some reason left out of her book The Shadow Network when they were talking about the direct mail company that would have certain lists of people. Now this was run by one Philip Zadantes, and I'll get into more of Philip Zadantes about how he's in prison right now, that he may have smuggled a girl and her mother to his Nicaraguan beach house around Contra, and to help her escape. They were a lesbian couple who were married, and they had a civil union. And the mother and the daughter have disappeared. They're disappeared. So that will be a very curious tale of Philip Dantes. But I do want to mention that Response Unlimited, of course, is on Shalom Road. That's funny. And when you click on their list catalog to see what you can buy a lot of different. You can buy Republican donors, 1,000+ list of Republican heavyweights, conservative Tea Party donors, GOP donors. But the funniest thing about all of this is you can buy and purchase National Policy Institute lists and white nationalist group lists.
Very, very, very.
Now, why would the CNP be selling out their own people?
Yeah.
Why you got church lists on here, Christian lists, white nationalists, NRA lists, like literally like anybody on the left, Southern Poverty Law Center, as sickening as they make me.
Oh, yeah.
They can come purchase this and get your idea that
that might be part of that might have been part of what led the SPLC in helping to get its getting the membership list of the CNP out.
No, I don't think they got it directly from this. I wish I could purchase them, but I mean, just look at it. Active donors to police charities, active Republican donors. Active, anti-abortionists, affluent retirees. I mean, this is Alan Keyes for president, 1996 mailing list. I mean, come on, people. This is sickening.
Yes.
American Friends for Israel. Americans Against Radical Islam. Anti-Sharia Christian donors. Why would a member of the Council for National Policy be selling a list of anti-Sharia Christian donors?
Yeah, and by the way, I've got the exact quote from this Nation article from 2005. 1996, Perkins paid former Ku Klux Klan Grand Wizard David Duke $82,500 for his mailing list. And this was, and also mentions in here Perkins addressing the Louisiana chapter of the Council of Conservative Citizens. And one of the early heads of the CNP, a man by the name of Woody Jenkins, was Louisiana State Congressman.
He was a founder of the CNP. Woody.
So Louisiana
Woody
kind of seems to maybe be a key connector with some of this Bible Belt Dominionist Zionism, and then these David Duke style white nationalists. But interesting with Council of Conservative Citizens, one of the early heavyweights with that was a man by the name of Sam Francis, who was a writer, who's a paleo-conservative writer for the Washington Times, of course, that being like the CNP mouthpiece daily newspaper. And then he was removed for speaking at after he spoke at an American Renaissance conference, I believe, Jared Taylor's organization. But I mean, that's once again, you see, and then I believe Sam Francis went on to be instrumental in the founding of VDARE, I believe, along with, I believe it was Peter Brimlow, who was a former writer, I want to say, for National Review. And so these are some of the strange bedfellows, Unholy Alliances, Council for Conservative Citizens, Tony Perkins, David Duke, paleo-conservatism, which sometimes dips its foot into anti-Jewishness, and then you've got the all-out, just rabid, anti-Jewishness as we know it of the David Dukes and the people of his ilk and the types of people who he influences, like the fine folks at the Daily Stormer and other people. So.
All right, here you go. Negative population growth focuses on education, the public, and policymakers to the wide range of problems caused by overpopulation. Why would the CNP be collecting data on people that agree with overpopulation? Like, you understand? Like, this is data on everyone. Everyone. That some people would not want to be given out. Okay? I mean, what about the people that are, stop Obama, or Obama's a Muslim? Obama should be in prison. Imagine, look, 96,481 people that signed on to an Obama should be in prison list. All right? Now, I think Obama should be in prison. He committed war crimes. Okay? Yeah. But why are they selling this information?
But I hear you, though.
This is bullcrap. You know what I mean? Like, the CNP is collecting this data and selling it.
So
on Shalom Road, of all places. Like,
well, maybe you and me and some other people need to pull our resources together and buy some of these lists. I don't know.
I thought about it. I mean, even the way funny about this is is a 2006 Southern Poverty Law Center article comes up. And it's about, in 2006, they knew about this. For 8 years, a major direct mail firm specializing in Christian and conservative markets has been selling leaders of the readers of America's leading anti-Semitic newspaper, The Spotlight with Willis Carto.
Oh, boy. Wow. Wow. Very interesting.
So yeah, when all the white nationalists were all worried, about giving their credit cards out, and stuff like that, to try to subscribe to shows like The Daily Show and everything. Yeah, I'm pretty sure the Council for National Policy's got all that information, and they're willing to sell it to the highest bidder because they don't give a flying crap about anybody.
Yeah, that's amazing. I think it definitely needs to be looked into more. I don't know what the reasoning is for that, but it's extremely fascinating. Something like that's right out there in the open.
Yeah, and Ann Nelson, she talks about them, having all these apps in her book, The Shadow Network, and how they're getting all this data on this app and everything. But she never happened to stumble upon Response Unlimited. Little bit interesting to me. And I've known about this for going on 2 or 3 years now, that I have looked at the curious case of Philip Zodantes. And I've talked about it before. I can't remember on what show many years ago that I brought this to the attention. So yeah, I mean, the CMP, they're with Cambridge Analytica. Everybody else tells me, John, well, why do you think this is so evil? The left is doing it too. Well, yeah, I'm sure they are. Don't get me wrong. But I'm just bringing what I've seen and what I've shown, and what I've showed is the CMP through Philip Zodantes, who's in prison right now, is collecting a crap ton of information on everyone. So.
Yeah, it's the first time hearing, I know you sent me the Response Unlimited link in the website, but this is the first time hearing that, like, the SPLC had been on top of this since 2006. And,
yeah.
And lo and behold, I do the Google search, and the SPLC article pops right up from April of 2006.
And look, I'm no fan of the SPLC, okay?
Sure,
but still, nonetheless, when someone does good work and you can verify it, it doesn't matter whom it's from, okay? Like I mentioned earlier with Lee Stranahan and his investigation in South Dakota Indian reservations, okay? It's always what I say about Alex Jones, except for the past couple of years, is the past couple of years, or I guess since Trump, it's gotten worse. But at one time about Alex Jones, you could say, and Josh Reese has said this before, it's not what Alex Jones tells you most of the time, it's what he does not tell you. That's the major problem. And it seems to be like that for a majority of these people.
Absolutely. I think it is more or less what they don't tell you. And this goes for operatives on different sides of the political aisle. I think it's more about what they don't tell you than what they do tell you. Because I think something people still have a hard time coming to grips with is that these propagandists are not everything they say is going to be lies. The best propagandists are going to mix in a lot of truth with these very poisonous lies. But that's the poison that gets you, is you lure it in with certain truths, or at the very least with certain talking points that are very much lining up with your personal beliefs. But then you throw in the poison of the disinformation. I think a lot of the times that's more significant than the legitimate truthfulness. I'll use an example. And this is somebody who I personally don't find a lot to agree with on. Rush Limbaugh, for example.
Yes.
I mean, his operation would not be effective if he wasn't saying a lot of things that at the very least sounded like truth to your average, I would say, even anti-war.
Well, that's how propaganda has to go,
but
right?
He throws the poison in there, and people a lot of times will they'll either understand some of the poison, or else they'll outright dismiss it because there's not one size fits all to everybody. But the best propagandists, here's the point I'm making, the best propagandists are going to mix their lies and deception in with a lot of truth.
Well, they have to, because you'll completely reject it. Well, then again, you do have crazy narratives nowadays that people believe, like, QAnon, for example. But still, nonetheless, you will have people who will. I mean, that's the objective of a proper propagandist, is to tell you 80% truth, 20% lies, and that 20% lie, or even leaving out information, not telling you the truth, and doing so that you believe the person on, especially in the really egregious lies that they're telling.
Yeah.
And I will say this: even Gordon Duff at one time, I remember him mentioning that I don't remember the exact percentage. All right.
I believe it was 40%.
Yes, and that's a problem, man. Like,
it is a big problem. It is a big problem, and
I do my best. It's more me and my friend always had a scale of like 95.5 is the best a person can get, because no one can know everything. So even someone who's earnest in the truth, like you and Jeremy, or myself, there'll be 5% of time where we're given disinformation just because we don't know the truth in that objective. We're not doing it on purpose. We just don't know.
Sure.
So we give the wrong narrative to people, or the wrong information. But everybody has differing percentages, and there are certain people, I guess I would say Mike Huckabee, for example, which is probably a 80-20, 20% truth, 80% bullcrap at best. So
Right.
everybody has levels.
Yeah.
But I didn't mean to cut you off. Go ahead.
No. I was just hearing you. Yeah, Mike Huckabee, the perfect example of the down home, folksy. He can, he's relatable to the good Christian American conservatives of the Bible Belt and of Middle America in general. So you don't, it's like, I think when it comes to relatable people like that, you probably kind of naturally let your guard down.
Yeah, and I will have to give Adam Green credit when credit is due. He did really ask the tough questions to Brother Nathaniel Kapler. And I've been, listening to Brother Nathaniel and his crazy lies off and on when I turn into Rinse every so often.
You know what's funny about Brother Nathaniel?
Yeah.
Is that you have all of this, and Brother Nathaniel himself is born Jewish. He's converted to Russian
Converso,
Orthodox, right?
yes.
But the ironic thing about Brother Nathaniel is that people talk about, people in Adam Green circles, they're all about like the stereotypical Jew. And to me, who represents the stereotypical neurotic Jewish person more than Brother Nathaniel?
No one that I know of. No one.
Even in his orthodox persona, I mean, he comes off as like a more stereotypically the way they perceive the stereotypical neurotic Jewish person to be. Kapner, even in his Christian Orthodox, Russian Orthodox based worldview or whatnot, however real or fake that is, I don't know. He comes off much more neurotic as a stereotypical negative perceptions of the stereotypical Jew in these people's eyes than most people do.
I would say with Brother Nathaniel Kapler and the whole Orthodox stick, I'm not going to question his belief in Jesus Christ or not, but I will say that it is very interesting that a lot of the Orthodox, specifically the Russian Orthodox, even the old ones like Dugin supposedly, they're very cozy with Zionism to some degree, and they're very cozy with the Russian Jewish oligarchs and the Mountain Jewish oligarchs in Russia.
There's stories out there about the patriarch of the Russian Orthodox Church, Kirill, and his KGB connections and organized crime connections. There's work that's been done out there on that. I need to shore myself up more on that, but there are articles detailing elements of that history with the patriarch of the Russian Orthodox Church. And for me personally, I don't know about Kapner. I wouldn't be surprised if he was fake. I wouldn't be surprised if he's just using this Orthodox thing just to make, I don't know. Maybe he's genuine, maybe he's not. I don't know. I don't want to.
I can't judge. Who for me to judge as a
That's
Christian?
true,
I can't do that.
I can look at his website and see a lot of BS though. But anyway.
Well, yeah, I can too as well. And I'm no fan of Brother Nathaniel Kapler, and I appreciate Adam Green.
You're right though. We can't say for sure. I don't want to get out there and all I can do is just like suspect. I don't want to go out there and throw out like accusations without like hard evidence or anything. But with the topic of the Russian Orthodox, very interesting. On one hand, yes, there is this Zionist kick, but at the same time, though, the way like these alt-right people will spin this is that Putin and the Russian Orthodox Church and the revitalization of faith in Russia is standing in the way of Western cultural degeneracy. So you have that, and that's a major part of this argument around Russia being this, and that's why some of these evangelical dominionists, even within organizations like the Family Research Council, I believe, through the World Council of Families, and promoting Russian anti-gay laws. That this is a major part of the narrative that Russia, through Putin and the Orthodox
But
Church,
they're not
is
doing
standing.
anything, though. That's
Well,
the thing
but
about
that's a big
Russia.
part of the perception of it, though. Is
Oh,
that
I know it
this,
is. It's bull
yeah,
crap.
but
It's the
it's a
whole.
key part of this perception of this Russia being an ally of the traditionalists against the decadent West and all that.
I think that's Duganism. I think that is Duganism at its finest, to make to subvert the West. Now, granted, I am no fan of the United States government. I am a fan, however, of the ideals of America and the American populace in of itself, and I choose that over Russia. And I do think that there are many people like Jay Dyer and Brother Nathaniel Kapler, among others, who are pushing that Russia is better than the United States. And it makes me sick to my stomach, especially people who are Americans who are pushing that, because they should have
It's
pride in their own country and their own people, and the hope that they will be redeemed.
at
It,
the
it's
at the
sickening.
end of the end of the day, it's not that much different than like these very, very, very Zionist and obvious, very fanatically pro-Israel people who put, it seems in many cases, Israel above the interests of the United States, or in the case of or even in the case of outlets like Breitbart, where even a lot of these American domestic issues are put in an Israeli lens, like we should have a wall just like Israel does, or we should have armed citizenry, or we should have armed security guards because the Israelis have armed security everywhere. And so it's like, these people have a vision of turning the U.S. into Israel and placing Israel above the United States. Well, there's a similar dynamic with people who place Russia above the United States, and it's no better.
Oh yeah, are people to discount Israel's involvement in the world order, or the Catholic Church, as far as the Pope and the Knights of Malta and the Jesuits, or even the Swiss's involvement within the world order? People discount. I mean, that's one of my criticisms about Green is anytime anybody mentions the Jesuits, he puts his nose up in the air.
Well,
And
there's a perfect example would be somebody like Pat Buchanan. Pat
yes,
Buchanan being a long-term, obviously, Knights of Malta Jesuit operative within the U.S. right-wing political establishment, going back to the Nixon and then Reagan days, and he still, to this day, still has his connections, obviously. And someone like Pat Buchanan, who is a Knight of Malta, he's very much pushing this particular strain of Catholicism, of Catholic supremacy, and yet Buchanan, he doesn't. I mean, what's the Jewish goal, or like what is the Jewish objective that is accomplished by Pat Buchanan sending out dog whistles of anti-Israel sentiments? In the coming Gulf War, it's going to be the McAllisters and the Leroy Browns and the
yeah,
Gonzaleses who are going to be dying. It's not going to be the A.M. Rosenthals at the New York Times who are going to be sending their children to die in this war in Iraq. The only people who benefit from Iraq war are Israel and its Amen corner in Washington. And then even some of the dog whistles he's played to with traditional traditional Catholicism standing up against the decadent, the degenerate, Jewish Marxist Bolsheviks who want to destroy the Catholic Church and destroy morality, and all the dog whistling he's done to revisionism in terms of World War II and aspects of the war and why it was fought and who it was fought for. I mean, it shows me that it's not so much that just everybody, even Pat Buchanan, at the end of the day, is a puppet of the Jews. It shows me that there are differing interests within this power structure that have
yes.
goals that don't always intersect with each other, but you're able to come together at the end of the day for bigger objectives and goals. But I mean, just look at like something the agenda that someone like Buchanan is promoting, and I don't see how Jews or Jewish people in positions of power gain from having Buchanan go out there and say all this. Somebody like that's just one example.
Yeah, I mean, you also, Sniff mentioning in the chat too about how the Babylonian oligarchy, Israel, even to this day, using the Babylonian Talmud, which is something that a lot of the Israel, or I guess anti-Jewish, more of your white nationalist people will completely not look at all. So, I mean, it doesn't surprise me. And it makes it so complicated, because I'll get called a white, just like Bill Cooper used to say, I'll get called a white nationalist by the Southern Poverty Law Center. And then the white nationalists will say that I'm a Jew lover because I don't dislike the Jews enough. And that I don't believe in the Jew world order. That I do believe that there are other power people in play. And I think it's just too simple to label it as such. And not to saying that both you and I are both against Israel first policy and Zionism, but to say that Jews completely run the world and the whole Jew world order, there's more power, there's more people at play.
Yes, there are, and this is something I'm coming around to myself, and I'm glad to have Jeremy, who himself is Jewish, as my co-host, kind of my partner in crime in this whole operation, because he can come at this from this Jewish perspective, and we see that because like a lot of people who have come into alternative media, I was kind of brought into this where I did, and I still do to a large extent. I still do acknowledge that there is a problem with disproportionate Jewish influence
of course
to their level, their percentage of the population, particularly when it comes to things like media and finance, and coming to grips with that, but then also like more recently just kind of breaking out of this. And I was never like a frothing at the mouth like Jews this, Jews that, like a lot of people are, but I have seen a problem with this for a long time, but I'm starting to really more and more, this is an area where I'm evolving in my mindset into seeing just beyond just that talking point of it's the Jews and moving past that and seeing that there's more to it than that, and also learning about the history of the Anti-Defamation League and NAACP and the Ku Klux Klan.
B'nai B'rith that Bill Cooper had spoken about.
B'nai B'rith International and the out of this particular branch of Freemasonry, which had a lot of influence in the U.S. in the pre-Civil War days, out of Baltimore, I want to say, and seeing that history. And then you see also another thing is that, people want this perception out there, and I think even organizations like the Anti-Defamation League want this perception out there and benefit from this perception that, the Jews rule the world, that there's just this all-powerful monolithic Jewish conspiracy that's just out to subvert and enslave humanity. I think that even these interests want that narrative out there because it benefits them. And, when you dehumanize your enemy, and that the thing is, though, is that Jews, the average rank and file Jewish person is just as much a victim of manipulation and of brainwashing as everybody else is. But when we take away, we have to be able to look at people through a human lens. And when we dehumanize people, whether it's dehumanizing entire population of people based on this idea that the monolithic Jewish conspiracies ruling the world and there are collective enemies, or we're dehumanizing people through this idea that because of Pizzagate and because of all this perceptions of elite pedophilia going on within the left, and you dehumanize the enemies of Trump as being apologists for evil, and when you dehumanize your perceived enemy, regardless of who it is, you dehumanize them, then you make you can't have a rational conversation when you just dehumanize your enemy. And that's one of the things with this idea of, and I'm not telling people to not focus on Zionism, not focus on the very real issues with Jewish power and influence. That's one of the things Jeremy and I try to do with Jeremy, bringing a Jewish perspective to this matter. But don't get to the point to where, and this is where so many people have fallen into this trap of this collective monolithic Jewish conspiracy to rule the world, and I think in the process of that it's very dehumanizing, and I think that organizations like the Anti-Defamation League, Southern Poverty Law Center, want that narrative out there because it's going to benefit the ultimate goal of putting in place these very draconian hate speech legislations that these people in positions of power and influence want. And so I think that this is a trap that you've got to walk and straddle a fine line between being honest about this stuff, but at the same time not going over the top with it in a manner that I think that these organizations that you perceive to be your adversaries want you to do.
Yeah, very much.
And they are adversaries to humanity and freedom, by the way. Just let's make that clear. But you don't want to act in the manner that they want people to act in, and that's why they love to promote David Duke and the Daily Stormer and these other entities, because they give that exact perception that they want people to have of. And number one, it discredits people who get into serious conversations about this stuff, and it also creates this image of the frothing at the mouth mindset and attitudes of this whole idea of Jewish power in a way that I think these organizations want people to behave in.
Yes, David, informer Duke, just like Hal Turner. Well, Greg, it's getting late, brother. Is there anything else that you want to discuss briefly? Anything else on your mind?
I guess I'll say one more thing here, and I think that just made me think about this with Duke, and I think I was talking about this with you when we were just talking yesterday. Duke and Richard Spencer also. It's important to note, it's important to point out that instead of ignoring these people or dismissing them or as either fringe kooks or as just these boogeymen that we should be scared of, it's important for people to actually listen to them and understand the roles they play in our society, because I mean, if you listen to David Duke, he's not, and I think this is by design, honestly. I think David Duke is kind of a gateway drug into the more outrageous, just frothing at the mouth types of anti-Jewishness that you see in so much of the alt-right and the white.
Because it comes up with the pomp and circumstance with my awakening.
Yeah, it's like Duke, though, introduces you to these other, but Duke and Spencer are they're very well-spoken, they're very articulate. You can come off almost like, it's believable that people can come out believing them because of the way they talk. But with Duke, I think it's more of the boogeyman of the fact that he was former Ku Klux Klan and how that's used in our society, and that's used to scare people rather than get people to really look into what he's talking about and really listen to him so they can understand the kind of propaganda he's pushing, like when he came out for Trump, for example. And I think that, and this is also why there needs to be an understanding that the Ku Klux Klan is not this literal, boogeyman that they make it out to be, but that the Ku Klux Klan, from a historical perspective, is part of a bigger controlled apparatus that has been working to kind of destabilize this country for over a century now, a very long-term operation going on. And so it's a trap.
It's a trap.
Yes.
And I mean, that's what the majority of the white nationalist movement is. And of course, with the National Policy Institute and Richard Spencer, of course, with the Regnery family, and the Regnery family being a big part of America First initially back during the 1920s and 30s, and as well Regnery Publishing and being part of the Council for National Policy. I mean, there's pictures you can look up of Richard Spencer with Laura Bush.
Yeah, very interesting.
I mean, so Spencer. Did you ever listen to Spencer and Alex Jones together, real quick?
Yes, I did. Oh, that was something else. And I will say this though, Jones interviewing Richard Spencer and also interviewing E. Michael Jones, and I mean, he pushed back much more against Richard Spencer than against E. Michael Jones, I guess, because Spencer was coming at it from a race-based theory as opposed to.
He kind of pushed back on him, but then he kind of didn't.
He did. He also was like, "Well, you're nothing compared to the leftists and their bigotry and their racism."
And then at times he would say that he would respect Richard Spencer too.
He was a combination of respecting him and also trying to push back a little bit against some of Spencer's racial views. I think it's because Spencer came at it from a racial perspective, whereas E. Michael Jones, who Alex Jones did not even attempt to push back at even one time during their 45-minute interview, despite E. Michael Jones saying everything about the Jews that he says in every other interview. But he was coming at it from the spiritual perspective and of the left, and we can blame the left for it. So it fit within that lens. But I would look at those two interviews as there's something more going on with Alex Jones than just Israel and Zionism.
Yeah, and I think E. Michael Jones is a limited hangout, in my opinion, too. I don't like E. Michael Jones very much myself.
Yeah. I mean, for example, he's from South Bend, Indiana, and the main problem with Pete Buttigieg is not, the reason he's evil because of his sexuality, and that's why he's such a bad candidate. But everything else, he might be this and that, and he might be a puppet for this and that, and the Rhodes Scholar and CIA
connect,
It all comes back to his sexuality and the fact.
Only that. It's the same with Kavanaugh. Only Blasé Ford. Not that he covered up for the Vince Foster murders.
No. And Kavanaugh was a good Catholic boy who was being persecuted by Jewish cultural Marxists.
Oh, that's the now we're going to Juku now. Now, come on. Now it all comes full circle, does it not, Greg?
Oh yeah, oh yeah,
Well,
it does.
I definitely want to thank you for having you on, brother. We're definitely going to have you on again in the near future. And if you're
Yeah, I'd
not,
like to, hoping to bring you on to our Antidote channel at some point in the future
yeah,
as well.
that'll definitely be fun. I cannot wait for that. And then if you guys aren't subscribed to the Antidote, you're not following Greg and Jeremy's work, the great work that they are putting out. I definitely recommend, if you are listening to this channel, which I'm pretty sure most people who are listening to this are subscribed to the Antidote. But if you are not, I definitely subscribed. I would definitely subscribe. I listen to everything you guys put out.
Thank you.
And I do deeply appreciate the work that you guys are doing to try to get the truth out there, and try to show that it is both sides on the political spectrum, both the left and the right. The left-right paradigm is a fraud, and that the world order is using that and as a way to divide people, and that they're both simply put, they're both fucks.
Exactly. That's very true. That was it's a very accurate way to put
It's
it.
very astute.
Remember what? Hey, for whatever faults he may or may not have had, George Wallace put it. He put it pretty well over 50 years ago, and he said there's a dime's bit of difference between the Republicans and Democrats. So.
Of course. Of course. All right, Greg, take care of yourself, brother.
All right, thank you very much.
Thank you. All right, that's it for this interview. I'm glad to have Greg on. I definitely will have him on again. Please subscribe to the Antidote. Both Greg and Jeremy do excellent work. I cannot say that enough. And definitely go subscribe and follow them. Greg is a dear friend, and I'm glad that we can have these discussions to try to bring the truth out to you guys. I'm going to have a conversation with Mark Kulak on Wednesday about Adam Schiff, International Man of Mystery, about him being a former disciple of Q and realizing that Q is a sham, and about his research on William Barr. We'll have a good conversation about William Barr and him being a fixer, and him being very intelligent, just like Schiff. And we're going to disprove a lot of the Q memes that go around that talk about Schiff and Barr, and try to bring the truth out about that. That's going to be a good show. I'm looking forward to talk with Mark from Houstonic Live. Mark and I talk some on Twitter. He may follow George Webb. And of course, everybody on this channel, knows that I believe that George Webb is a LARPer. He's okay with a little bit of rat lining, a little bit of drug trafficking, good Mossad and all that. I do think that Mark does put out good work. And I do watch his videos. I think it's going to be a very interesting conversation. I think it's going to be a very friendly conversation. So I hope. We're also going to talk about the opioid epidemic. Mark has talked about on his channel. The opioid epidemic has affected both of us. It has affected family members of ours. We're going to talk about the Sackler. I'm going to bring up the Sackler family and how the Sackler family funds a lot of people on the right, but also funds some people on the left too, like Bernard Sanders. So that's going to be a very interesting when I discuss some of my research into who the Sackler family is funding. But I think it's going to be a good show. I'm also going to do some more research. And more shows on the Finders, some more shows on the Council for National Policy. I'm sorry about not streaming yesterday. It's kind of always a difficult period this time of year. It's the anniversary of my son Abel's death, and I won't be streaming next weekend. We usually go out of town during that time period. I know my son is with the Lord, just like King David, and I don't necessarily grieve anymore, because I'm happy that my son is in heaven. But it's still a difficult time period for my family. So hopefully I'll have some streams the week following with Lee Veltman. And that's it. So as always, till next time, continue reading the documents. God bless everyone. Take care.